Hey, Rumble World Entertainment, and Clayface is on its way, of course, after the disaster of Supergirl and Superman and all this stuff. But it's the one DC movie that's brand new that actually has a chance to make money, because apparently they spent next to nothing on it. Whether that's true or not, we'll find out, because of course it was filmed in the UK, so we will get it. But you can see here it's saying Clayface synopsis gets a rewrite. Matt Hagen is now a victim, not a monster. So, of course, we know this is meant to be the Clayface that was in Creature Commandos, which was killed in Creature Commandos as well. James Gunn has confirmed that. But now they're framing him as a victim and not a monster, and they've changed quite a lot about the synopsis for this. And we're then told about whether or not Batman will be in this and stuff like that from the director and stuff like that, and they're talking slightly, Peter Safran spoke slightly about Mike Flanagan, how they really wanted him to direct it, and of course he wrote this. Question is, how much of his story is still actually in this, because after he left and said I can't direct, but off you go, they went and rewrote the script, so how much of his story is still in here we don't quite know. But let's have a look at this, because it's interesting how they're now framing this, even though he's still actually a villain. So Warner Brothers has rewritten the official synopsis of DC Studios' Clayface, and the biggest change goes straight to how the studio is selling Matt Hagen. He is no longer a monster, which is... So the newest production information sheet for the James Watkins horror film, stamped as of the 20th of this month, carries a revised synopsis that softens the title character's framing, swaps out two of the story's stated themes, and adds a new official credit. So, Comic Book News compared the new sheet word for word against the previous version dated June 17th. Here is everything that has changed. Now, this is good the way they do this, actually, that they've put out what they've previously wrote to how and what they've changed. So the June synopsis describes the film as one man's horrifying descent from rising Hollywood star to revenge-filled monster. The new July sheet describes the same descent as going from rising Hollywood star to a disfigured victim seeking revenge. So as you can see, they've taken out the monster and they've put in revenge or victim, but they kept that he's still seeking revenge. So the revenge is still there, but the emphasis has flipped from what Hagen becomes to what was done to him. It is a more sympathetic, more human way to sell the character, and studios do not change one word off a logline by accident. The character descriptor got a polish too. June called Hagen's alter ego the Gotham City villain. The new sheet calls him the cult favourite villain from Gotham's rogue gallery. Fan-facing language that leans into the character's comic book pedigree, which they are now trying to seem to frame it a bit more off. It's a DC, Batman, rogues gallery kind of thing. Maybe that's an indication that the interest they thought would be there isn't as strong as they thought. So they really need to push like the idea of it's part of the rogues gallery. Maybe not, but that's could be what they're talking about there. So there's an interesting tension in that. The character description leans harder into the comic book villain, while the story description leans away from it. So Rogues Gallery is Batman coded language, so on the character, Warner Brothers turned the comic pedigree up, but on the story, every change points the other way. Monster becomes victim, mad science becomes obsession, and the supervillain origin framing softens into a standalone tragedy, which you'll see what they mean by the science and stuff up here. So that squares with how James Gunn has pitched the film all along, calling it a body horror movie that just happens to be set in the DCU. This is not being sold as a Batman villain origin story, it is being sold as a horror tragedy that stars a DC character. Interestingly, the new synopsis comes with Matt Reeves, the Batman Part 2, getting a new release date further away from Gunn's Man of Tomorrow. Now, one of the things that they've just spoken about there is how they're not pushing this as a DC character movie, really. They were pushing it as a body horror. I've already spoken about how I think the idea behind that could be that they're thinking casual audiences, especially horror fans, will see these trailers and go, ooh, this looks interesting, but may get put off by then seeing the DC logo and go, oh. Whereas they still have to go, it's a DC villain to get the DC fans on board. It's interesting the way they're doing. And the question now is, how much has James Gunn put his grubby mitts all over this movie? Hopefully none, but yeah, when you kind of hear it's how James Gunn has been pitching it all along and stuff like that, you kind of go, uh-oh. So the traumatic language has overhauled as well. Or the thematic, sorry. The June synopsis said the story explores the loss of one's identity and humanity, along with corrosive love and the dark underbelly of scientific ambition. The new version drops nearly all of that. It now reads that the story explores the loss of humanity and the destruction that comes from an all-consuming obsession. So the love angle and the science angle are both gone from the official framing, and identity is gone with them. Obsession is the new through line. Given that Hagen's transformation reportedly stems from an experimental treatment, pulling scientific ambition out of the logline suggests Warner Brothers would rather sell this as a psychological obsession story than a mad science. I'm curious as to why. Why don't they just go with the mad science end of things? It's weird. So the word choice is loaded too. Obsession is arguably the single biggest word in horror right now. Because of the movie, probably. Focus features micro-budget horror with Obsession, made for $750,000, has exploded into one of 2026's biggest genre success stories, grossing more north of 400 million worldwide and spending weeks or near the top of the box office. I think it's back at number 8, I think, in the box office right now, above Supergirl. And then it just kind of goes on. So you can see where they're kind of framing it now as he's the victim, not the villain, and stuff like that. So in terms of Mike Flanagan's involvement, Peter Safran said this. So he was talking to a site, blah, 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 where he said, we really wanted him to direct it. I mean, really, really wanted him to direct it. But Flanagan is so booked up. He had so many things on his plate. So he said, listen, I can't direct it, but you have my blessing. Go with God. So that's where they're kind of saying they really tried to get him to direct it. Which is interesting that he had time to write it, but not direct it. That doesn't sound right to me. It's like he said, hey, I got an idea for a Clayface movie. He put pen to paper. He spent all this time writing it. He was originally said to direct it and then dropped out at the last minute and said, I can't direct it. And then they rewrote the thing. So I'm kind of questioning, did Peter Safran and James Gunn start throwing in notes and stuff like this? And basically he said, you know what, screw this. I'm not putting up with this crap. I don't know. As for Batman, whether or not the Dark Knight will show up, we of course heard from the test screenings that he isn't in it, nor is he even mentioned. And Watkins didn't flat out deny anything when asked about if a cameo was on the table. This is what he said to that. The story is Clayface's story. It's Matt Hagen's story. If you just took one person within the world of Gotham and followed their story, it's about following the integrity of that. You don't necessarily bump into any of these people. It's just one big city. I can see why people worry about these things, but that's not my job. My job is to worry about is this story honest to itself and not try to think of ways to be cute, I suppose. So that's his kind of, we don't need Batman. That's basically what he's saying there. Is like, maybe they weren't given the option or something. Matt Reeves is involved in this. He's an executive producer. He's probably in name and name only, which is what's confusing people, because this movie was meant to be an Elseworlds movie, which leans into, especially if Matt Reeves was involved, that it could possibly be a part of the Batman universe, like the Batverse. And then, of course, James Gunn hijacked it and said, no, it's part of my DCU. So maybe that's why Batman isn't going to be in this, because maybe the idea was to try and have Robert Pattinson's Batman show up maybe by the end of the movie. But of course, James Gunn has now taken the movie for himself, so maybe it's ended up being the case of, well, now we can't use Batman. So I don't know. But I do find it quite interesting how they've changed the synopsis and the wording in it, that they're now framing him as a victim as opposed to the monster, even though a monster is exactly what he is, and we know that he's now the guy who becomes the Clayface that was at the end or in an episode of Creature Commandos. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see what exactly they do. They must be shitting themselves with this movie. With the failure of Supergirl and how bad it felt, they must be shitting themselves and getting nervous about this movie now, going, uh-oh, will this work? Again, it's got the best chance of working, being the fact that they spent so little on it, supposedly, but time will tell. But what do you guys think? Do let me know what you think of this new wording, and do you think Batman could be in here? And how much of Mike Flanagan's actual script do you think is still in existence for this movie? Let me know. And with that, I shall leave it there for this one. So do like and share and subscribe and all that good stuff. Cheers. I'll catch you in the next one.